Good to have you back on Newsday. Now, the discussion around the removal of fuel subsidy by President Bola Tinubu has refused to go away. While some have lashed out at the president for that singular act, others have without doubt given him a thumbs up, noting that it was the only way Nigeria can resurrect from its economic quagmire. Joining us now to share his perspective on the national issue is a former manager, Chevron Nigeria, a Labour Party senatorial candidate for Abia South in the last general elections, Chinedu Onyeizu. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so you've heard it. Reactions continue to trail the oil subsidy removal. How would you assess, the narrative surrounding this issue so far?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So, a subsidy removal by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a bold step in the right direction. Of course, in the past couple of years, it's been a burden on our economy. In fact, according to NITI, from 2005 to 2021, Nigeria has spent over $78 billion, paying for subsidy, and then that has cost us a lot. Nigerians are poor, over 133 million Nigerians, over 63% of Nigerians are, multidimensionally poor. So the burden is high. In fact, we spend more on subsidy than the total budget for health, education, and infrastructure. You will agree with me, even a war-torn country like Ukraine, in a scenario of in a situation of emergency, the quality of health support that you see when there is any emergency is better than what we have in Nigeria today. Looking at the primary health care centers that we have in Nigeria. On education, 1 in every 5 out-of-school children in the world is a Nigerian child. Talk about infrastructure. Last year, Nigeria spent only 1.7% of its budget on infrastructure, while Egypt and Kenya spent about 3.2% and 6% respectively. So that tells you the burden subsidy has been mounting on our economy. However, the concern is more on what happens with the savings from the subsidy removal. If we go by the data that Nigerians consume about 66 million liters of fuel per day, with about 300 naira that is added on what we are used to paying, which is 197 naira, Nigeria is making about $30 million every day, saving about $130 million every day from the removal of subsidy. So, again, because of the economic implication to the poor Nigerians out there, I think we are putting the cart before the horse. In my view, I think we should have been able to put together a strategy that will manage the impact on the people before we remove a subsidy. And there are solutions to permanently remove fuel subsidy payment in Nigeria.
All right, you've actually touched on some key issues. One which some of them, let me just highlight some of them so that we can actually tackle them. You've actually said that on a daily basis, quoting you now, that we actually recoup about $30 million.
Correct.
On a daily basis.
Yes.
And that's quite a lot.
Correct.
Understanding that when you actually do the calculation by 1 month, when you do the calculation by 6 months, that's quite a lot.
Correct.
Then the question will be, a lot of people have asked the question, how do we spend or how do we reinvest these monies that are being recouped from the whole fuel subsidy?
Yeah, thanks. So,
that's one question.
Okay.
But where I'm going to is, how soon should we start seeing the dividends of this subsidy removal is the big question. Because if you say that we recoup about $30 million on a daily basis,
correct,
that means in 2-3 months, palliatives should touch all and sundry, because we do have enough to be able to almost go round and at least cushion the effect of subsidy. And in a space of 365 days, we should begin to see physical infrastructural shift in Nigeria. Talk to us about this.
Thank you for that perspective. So there's and that's why I said we put the cart before the horse. What we would have done if I was to advise authorities in government was for the government of Bola Tinubu to work out a strategy, a smart strategy, an attainable. He could have an attainable strategic objective that says in 2 years we will remove subsidy payments, so that before the 2 years he will put in place a solution that will permanently remove subsidy and expand the petroleum industry. And this takes us to the solution I want to profile. Currently, we have the NUPRC, the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission. We also have the NUMDPRC, the Nigerian Midstream Downstream Petroleum Commission. If I were the president, I will restructure the petroleum industry beyond the PIA to separate NUPRC, to separate the midstream downstream, so that they will have the NUPRC, the Nigerian Midstream Regulatory Commission, and the Downstream Regulatory Commission. Make them autonomous business units. Start to divest every non-profitable subsidiary of NNPC. Today, we get records that in Kaduna Refinery publishes over 65 billion naira in operating costs without Tenkobo coming to the coffers of the government in revenue. So I will divest every burden that is in NNPC. I will convert NNPC, I will turn NNPC to assume a regulatory position only. It will have a non-operating interest in the oil and gas business.
Okay.
When I divest, I will recruit money, add it to what I'm saving, I could save from subsidy, and expand the sector. I'm talking from a position of authority and knowledge, because I've spent 2 decades in oil and gas industry, and IOC like Chevron, where I worked 5 years in Escravos, so I understand what is there. I also understand that NNPC, the federal government, owns 60% of the assets, not only the oil, the assets in Escravos and Forcados for Shell.
Okay.
So that's an opportunity for Nigerians to be incentivized to go into establishment of modular refineries and small-scale refineries at source. That is the game changer. So in Escravos, for example, we will have an Aeron Nigeria Limited, running a modular refinery, refining 10,000 barrels of oil per day. We will have a Onyeizu Nigeria Limited refining 30,000 barrels of oil per day. So instead of us to save money to consume fuel, we should save money to produce fuel. We move the economy, the petroleum industry, the Nigerian petroleum industry, from a situation where it consumes and imports fuel to where it produces and exports fuel.
If I may come in, Chinedu, that's exactly where I'm going now. You talked about the issue of savings. You emphasized the issue of savings. But the issue of reporting refined oil products to meet domestic consumption needs and all that with zero subsidy regime, isn't this retrogressive? And, how does this improve on demand and supply? It's interesting you brought out the issue of modular refineries. We remember the tenure of Ibe Kachuku.
Yes.
There seems to be much rhetorics on that. But in terms of action, we saw very little of that. How many modular refineries do we even have, to meet such specific petroleum products, whether it's diesel, whether it's PMS, or, as you know, kerosene? So where are we going with this, in terms of still importing this issue? I'm glad you also brought up the issue of these refineries. Are they moribund now, the 4 main refineries? And aren't we putting our eggs in one basket with the new Dangote refinery as well?
Yeah. So you've asked a lot of questions at the same time. But then tackling your question on importation of PMS, Nigeria, with over 38 billion barrels of crude oil in reserves, proven reserves, the best form of crude oil in the world, we don't have business importing fuel. Do you know that Mobil and Chevron, that have been producing in Nigeria for over 40 years, refines, Mobil in particular, refines over 6 0.3 million barrels of crude oil every day in Singapore. So what happens is that they come here, they produce our crude, they take it to Singapore, they refine it, and Nigerian leaders pay subsidy for us to bring back a byproduct of the same crude oil that is taken from our backyard. So the conditions for this whole thing to turn around is, first of all, there are three conditions I tell people. First of all, political will to dismantle the cartel behind this. Second of all, the political will. And third of all, the political will. Nigeria has everything it takes to refine its own crude. Have us buy it for less than $100 and even export. Again, to add to what I told you about working for Chevron, my study at MIT, I'm a Snow Fellow of Massachusetts Institute of Technology. My research work at MIT was solely on Nigeria's subsidy removal strategies. I went ahead to do another program at Herod White University in Edinburgh, where my focus was, how do we come out of this quagmire as a country? So it's doable. It's just the political will of the government in power. And I like the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has taken. If you look at the bold steps that you can see he took in a couple of weeks back, he has dissolved boards that were never touched by previous governments. He has taken out subsidy, but then the subsidy should have come after we have made investments, in making sure fuel is available for Nigerians to consume.
All right, Chinedu, permit me to say this. In as much as a lot of people out there, they are actually celebrating the president and the bold move he's taken, I'm not flustered, because some people still believe that all this is smokescreen. Reason being that the challenge lies ahead. The challenge that lies ahead is even tougher than what it is, because it's one thing to take out subsidy. It's another thing to be able to repurpose those monies to actually serve Nigerians. Some are fearful because Nigerians don't trust the government. Coming off the heels of what even happened with the Independent National Electoral Commission and Nigerians in the just concluded general elections, some are afraid that we might have just swapped one, permit me to say, one criminal for the other. That we might have just opened a loophole for some others, or blocked a hole for some others to stop benefiting from this whole subsidy, and opened a hole for some others to benefit from the subsidy removal. We've seen this happen time and time again. We've seen heads of parastatals gulp billions of naira. We've seen heads of agencies probably swindle so much that 3 generations cannot finish. How do we ensure that these monies actually flow through the right channel, to the right places, to be able to make the desired impact?
Yes, so again, you've echoed my concern. Subsidy removal is important, but what happens afterwards is more important. The only hope the common man has today is that the subsidy that is being paid trickles down to the millions out there that are poor, because it affects their transportation fees, it affects what the price of what they consume every day. So that's why I've proposed that a strategy, the president needs to put together a team that will first of all look at a very smart strategy that is attainable. Give us 2 years and communicate it to your people. Let Nigerians know. In 2 years, subsidy will be removed. In 2 years, we will have fuel. We will start exporting. Then, make sure the NNPC assumes a regulatory status. Divest every other thing to manage the corruption in NNPC. Divest all that they are doing in MPDC, Kaduna Refinery, and all that. And empower the 3 regulatory organizations I proposed. The Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, a Nigerian Midstream Regulatory Commission, and a Nigerian Downstream Regulatory Commission. This regulatory commission should be charged to become a revenue source to the government. They should be empowered to make money for the government. So what you are doing is you are cutting costs and then you are increasing revenue. When you do that for the government, the per capita GDP will expand. So as I said initially, for the upstream man, the upstream body, they make sure crude is available for the modular refineries that are co-located with the chevrons in Escravos and the shells in Forcados, so that a minimum volume of crude is provided for them to refine. The midstream regulatory organization, because they are independent, they are autonomous and a revenue source to the government, will make sure that Chinedu Onyeizu Limited, if I'm interested in investing in evacuating the fuel that NII produces or refines, I will make money as a private entity. And then the downstream guy will make sure that the fuel gets to the pump, to the filling stations in the country. At this rate, you will see that competition will set in. When competition sets in, the pump prices will drop. When the pump prices will drop, they will now start exploring opportunities to export fuel. You don't need to bother about fuel going beyond our borders. You don't need to check. It's good business that Nigerians are able to refine locally and service the regional markets for PMS consumption. NNPC has become a monolithic waste pipe to this our economy, and we need bold steps from the president to checkmate it and to reverse the trend.
Bold step indeed. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for this segment and we could go on and on regarding this issue. Chinedu Onyeizu, petroleum engineer, politician, and of course, former manager of Chevron, would like to thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you very much.